so much for that introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I always enjoy doing these types of presentations because, again, I think they're so helpful in everything that you plan to do in academics and just in life. So the title is How to Give a Winning Presentation. So I like to do presentations that are really interactive, so I want to go ahead and say right from the start, do you mind moving kind of over to the center? Because for some of the activities, you'll need a partner. And some of those who are sitting, if you could maybe just move in a little bit to the left, that would be good. Thank you so much. Do you mind moving for me over this way? Okay. Closer to some of those who are seated here, that way you can get a chance to participate. So let me just go through the outline of what we'll talk about today. I want to give you just a little bit about my background to tell you about how I got to be here. And then we're going to talk about how to take a selfie. And it'll all relate back to giving a winning presentation, I promise. We'll talk about some of the tools, what that procedure is, and then how you can vary that. And then we'll talk about elements of a good presentation. And we know a lot of that has to do with what you say, how you say it, and then what visual aids you use to make your points. And then finally, we'll just do a recap and talk about what are the elements of a winning presentation. Because there's a difference between a good presentation and a winning presentation. We'll highlight some of those. And then finally, we'll talk about what going the extra mile entails. So a couple of things you'll need is a digital device. So I think most of you all have cell phones, or you may have a laptop or a tablet. So feel free to go ahead and take that out and have it next to you. If you don't have a digital device, then a pen and paper will work just fine. And then maybe just a little bit of courage for some of the things I'll ask you to do in a minute. So about me. So my name is Christina Glenn. And yes, I'm actually from here, from Birmingham, Alabama. So I studied music here at UAB, and I also studied mathematics. And a lot of people ask me, well, how did you get into studying mathematics if you were a music major? And I always tell them, my mom. She told me to go into mathematics and study that because she felt like I had a lot more stability in mathematics as opposed to the music, and she was actually right. So, not that I don't use the music, but the mathematics degree has opened up so many doors for me, and I'm happy I made that decision early on. So, after I got my bachelor's degree in mathematics, I started to teach in the Birmingham City school system. After a couple of years, I kind of got burnt out with that, just the environment and some things that were going on, and I decided it was best for me to go back to school to pursue higher education. So, I returned in 2010. And I finished up that, and then I decided to study mathematics at higher level because I wanted to be able to ultimately be able to teach it at the college level. So I ended up getting an applied mathematics degree from here, UAB. As I was doing that, I knew that I had developed a love for public speaking. I took a communication class here, public speaking, because it was required for my major, and I fell in love with public speaking by taking that class. And I decided that I needed more skills to know how to be able to effectively present to an audience, so I decided to become a Toastmaster. And that's just an organization that enhances your public speaking and leadership skills. So in 2015, I won second place in that international speech competition, and that's something I'm really proud of. And I hope to share with you some of the tips that really helped me be successful in that. Right now, I'm actually pursuing my doctorate in biostatistics. And a lot of people see that word and they wonder, well, what is biostatistics? So a lot of people say, well, biology and statistics, but not necessarily. So biostatistics just refers to a branch of statistics where we take statistical methods and apply them to health-related data. But it doesn't have to be health-related data. It could be data related to education or anything. So biostatisticians are really, really flexible. And they're really needed for a lot of different research projects that happen on campus. I am also a CIRL practitioner. So CIRL stands for the Center for the Integration of Research, Teaching, and Learning here at UAB. I knew that I was in STEM, but I wanted to prepare myself to better be able to educate people who are STEM majors. And so part of my research in CIRL is actually determining what strategies or methods increase student engagement in the classroom. And so that's why I really like to use a lot of active learning strategies in my presentations. Recently, I won the Al M. Bass Biostatistics Teaching Award, and so with that, I'll be continuing my research project. And then finally, I want to talk to you all about pathways. If I were to ask you how you got here this morning, some of you will say, well, I took 65, and then I came 59, and then I came down here to University and I'm here. Somebody else may say, well, I just walked over from Blazer Hall and I'm here. It doesn't matter how you got here, which pathway, because someone may ask the question, well, what's the right pathway? The right pathway is the pathway that you chose to get to be where you are. I always had a temptation when I was sitting where you all are now to wonder, well, why is my academic career not like my peers, or why is it not like this one, or why is it not like that one? Because it's my path, and your path is going to look different from everyone else's. So what I encourage you to do is just embrace it and have fun along the way. All right, so a lot of us have heard the saying, if it ain't broke, then don't what?
Fix it.
Right. And you know what? I think that is the biggest lie that someone ever could have told. Because when you think about research, it's not necessarily that something is broken. It's that we see that maybe there's a way to make this work better. So instead of if it ain't broke, don't fix it, how about if it's not broken, break it down. Put it back together and make it better. And so when you think about why do we want to be able to give a good talk, let me kind of solicit some of your feedback. Just kind of share out with me. Why do you think it's important to give a good talk? Anybody?
Good talk like one-on-one or good talk like presentation?
Like a presentation.
To be effective to your listeners?
To be effective to your listeners. That's a good response. How many of you all have ever sat in a lecture and you did not get anything out of it because you slept the whole way through? So again, that's not good for anybody. What else do you think is a good reason that you want to give a good presentation? Anybody, just share out with whatever you think.
Maybe to get people interested in what you're talking about for them to do in the future?
Of course, to get or build interest in a particular area. To me, there's nothing better than hearing a good presentation on a current event or a topic that can pique your interest and really make it into something that you may want to be able to study further. Another thing about presentations is that first impressions matter. How you present yourself, how you walk, your posture, all of these things are important. And then again, the knowledge is meant to be shared. What good is it for us to spend hours and hours in the lab or hours and hours in front of the computer doing all of this good research and no one knows anything about it? So that's why we like to take the time to build the skills necessary to convey that to the audience in a way they'll understand it. It's good practice for any career. Just about any employer will tell you that a skill that is in high demand of any potential employee are public speaking skills. You may have to present results at a meeting. You may have to give updates on what's going on. So it's good for you to feel confident in sharing those things out with your peers. And then finally, it's good preparation for a formal presentation, if you have research and you want to present that, or just for an informal discussion. You may be at a networking event. I know there are a lot of those types of events that happen on campus, and it's a good way for you to get to know people and to get to share out what your backgrounds are. And a lot of those networking experiences lead to jobs and lead to other opportunities. So that's why you really want to make sure that you take the time to figure out what it takes to give a good presentation. All right, so now let's get to it. How to take a selfie. We'll need some tools. We'll talk about the procedure, and then we'll do a few variations. So what are the tools? Of course, you. So definition of selfie is a picture of yourself, but it can include your friends, and we're going to use a digital device. So if you have your cell phone, go ahead and make sure you have it unlocked. If you have to put your code in, or if you have your device, go ahead and make sure you are ready to use that. So let's talk about what the procedure is. So what you'll do is you'll pose, and you'll snap your photo, and then if you like, you can share it on social media or not. You can just keep it in your phone. You can take a picture by yourself, or you can take it with your friends. There are several different backgrounds now. There are apps even that'll make you look like a totally different person. So there are tons of things you can do with these selfies on phones now. You can even add a special effect if you like, or use a frame. So now let's get to the activity. What I'd like for you to do is strike a pose, snap a selfie of yourself, and then we'll turn and talk to a neighbor about it. And what I want you to comment on is your partner's facial expression. And there's a reason we're doing this, because we'll come back to this photo later. Okay, so let's take minute and a half, just take a selfie, and then we'll share it with the person next to us. So let me put you guys on the clock. Oh, those are going to be some nice selfies. About done with that, so hang on to that. I promise we'll come back to this and then we'll tie all this back together. Okay, so make sure you keep your selfie and keep in mind what your partner's selfie look like, okay? And we'll come back to this in a minute. Let's get to now what are the elements of having a good presentation. So I think we could put all this into two main categories, the nonverbal communication and then the verbal communication. And you see I have percentages, and these are percentages based on my opinion. I believe that 80% of your effectiveness is coming from your nonverbal communication. And then maybe 20% is coming from actually what you say. And I say that because if no one is paying attention to what you're saying, then it really doesn't matter what you're saying because nobody will get it. How many lectures have you fallen asleep on? I mean, the professor is just teaching the way, but you're not following. So, verbal communication and nonverbal communication play a huge part in our presentation skills. I have an activity that I'd like us to do. What I want you to do is a quick write, and you can either use your device or you can write it down on paper. I want you to write down what you think are the most important verbal communication elements that go into a presentation. Then I'd like you to write down what you think are the most important nonverbal elements that go into a good presentation. Let me give you about a minute to think about that. And I'd like to call a couple of volunteers who are willing to just write some of the responses that you all have given for elements to go in each of these columns. So is there anyone that would like to come volunteer to write some up on the board, please? Thank you. What is your name?
I'm Courtney.
Courtney, thank you. Can I get one more volunteer to come down to just write out the responses that we share for either one? Okay, got a couple of them in the back. What's your name?
William.
William, thank you. Come on down. Guys, give our volunteers a hand, please. So, again, I want to hear from you. What do you think are the most important elements of communication as it relates to the verbal? Okay, so Courtney's going to write what she thinks is important, but I want to get some responses from you all. So anybody, just share out. Under the verbal, what do you think is important?
Volume.
Volume, yes. So volume, you think is really important. And you know what? Volume plays a big role when it comes to placing emphasis on what it is that you're talking about. So that is huge. That's a good one. Anybody else, what do you think is important for the verbal?
The tempo.
Tempo. So William, actually what I'd like you to do is write the responses for the nonverbal column for me, okay? So we'll do that one in 1 minute, but thank you. Oh, that's a very important one too, diction, yes. Did we get that one? Tempo, I like that, that's a music term, super important. Anybody else under verbal?
The pitch.
Pitch, very good. No, you're fine. Anybody else under verbal?
I said clarity.
Clarity, huge, yes. Any more for verbal communication?
I feel like it ties all together, but your passion through the way you talk.
Action, yes. Action, yes, that always shows through, definitely. Okay, wait a minute, William, I still need you up here, actually. Don't leave just yet. So for nonverbal, let's start that column. So movement, of course, movement is important. Expression, your posture is huge because you don't want to slouch and slump. It just gives the impression that you really don't want to be there. Anybody else for nonverbal? Eye contact, huge.
You all right there?
Yes, please. Eye contact. Anybody else? Yes.
It's gonna seem a little shallow, but appearance has a lot to do with.
Huge, yes. And actually that was one of the first points on one of my slides. First impressions matter. So your appearance is very important. Anyone else? Nonverbal communication. I mean, we do it all the time without thinking about it.
Gestures.
Say it again.
Gestures.
Gestures, yes, huge. Gestures. William, do you mind writing gestures up there, please? So I see that you all have already really captured some of the most important elements of nonverbal and verbal communication. I kind of want to highlight a few of these. Eye contact. You want to make sure that you are looking at your audience. And often what I do, I'll just pan the room. I'll look to the left, maybe in the center, and then to the right, because you want to include everyone. And then your hand gestures. What are you doing with your body? One thing I love about people who do ballet and these different types of dances is they have such control over their limbs and how they move. And I think it just makes what they do even more graceful. And it's always, I can always tell a professional dancer versus a novice by the amount of control they have. So I think that's really important, really huge. Are there any others that you'd like to point out and emphasize on either category, the verbal or the nonverbal? Do you have one?
I think it's kind of really but pertaining to who your audience is, kind of like engage with them or relate to them who you're talking to. So I think they go from
Yes, so being relatable. It's good to know something about your audience. So before I come to speak, I actually do a little bit of research. So I find out what's the audience that I'm speaking to, what is your background, maybe what is your level in school, because all of those things help me to kind of tailor my speech to you. All right, perfect. Everybody give our volunteers a hand. Thank you so much. I'm just going to go over a few of these that we've already talked about, highlighting the last one. Pauses are really, really important under the verbal because pauses can help enhance your message. Have you ever been in a presentation where people just talk, no break? It doesn't even give you time to think. Some of my friends are like that too. And it makes it difficult to follow. So if you can strategically insert pauses into your speech, you can really pull everybody in. And also your volume and your tone. So these things are huge when we talk about giving a presentation. Space fillers such as I found that the more I practice what I'm going to say, the less I use filler words. So that just comes, I think, with experience and time. What about nonverbal communication? We talk about a lot of these, and see, number one, appearance. So how you look does play a big part, and unfortunately, a lot of people will judge you based on your appearance, even before you say anything. So you want to make sure that your appearance is neat, that it's professional, before you give any type of presentation. I want to focus on here, device management and props. So I like to use a clicker, and when I'm doing this type of presentation, I use a mic. But you have to be careful that it looks like you're not juggling all of these tools, because the purpose is not the tools. These are just used to facilitate the presentation, but these are not the presentation. So you want to make sure that you're not distracting your audience with the use of any type of device or tool as you're speaking. Visual aids. One thing that's important about visual aids is that you want to make sure specifically the appropriate number of slides for the time limit. How many of you have been in classes where there were like 1,000 slides for a two-hour lecture? And so you just feel like it's a death by PowerPoint type of thing. You want to make sure that you tailor everything that you're going to say and you make it just the right length. Because again, you're giving too much information. After a period, nobody's listening to what you're saying anyway. The retention is lost at that point. Use bullet points as a guide, not as a script. I have been in presentations where literally the presenter read word for word off of the slides, and to me there is nothing worse than that. I'm saying to myself, look, I can read. The purpose for you now is to just highlight some of those points, but not to read things to me word for word. So make sure that that's something you don't get into the habit of doing. And the more you practice it, the less likely you will rely on the slides word for word. All right, now this is the meat of the presentation right here. And it goes back to appearance. What you think you look like may not be what you look like to others. And this is why I had you take the selfie in the beginning. I want to talk about something called resting face. Resting face is the position that your face is in when you're just in a neutral mood. You're not happy, you're not sad, you're just neutral. What you think your resting face looks like, again on the left, this This is what you think you look like. Pleasant and sweet, but in actuality, you look like the picture on the right. And what emotion would you all attach to the picture on the right if you had to describe that person's expression? Right, apathetic, completely over it, I'm just done, let's move to the next thing. So we want to work on our resting face, and it's something that I had to come to terms with, because people would tell me that I had a mean-looking resting face, and I'm saying, what is wrong with these people? I am not mean, until I had an experience, and I took a look at my resting face. It's really a mean face, and I'll show it to you. This is my resting face. And when you walk up to people and they see you like that, they automatically say, hey, this person is stuck up, they're standoffish, I don't want to have anything to do with them. This is not the face that I want to walk into a room full of people and talk about presenting research, because a lot of people have already checked out before I've started. So how can we investigate our resting face? Third and last activity, this is what I want you to do. I want you to take a selfie of you with your resting face. So you're not happy, you're not sad, you're just neutral. To the best of your ability, snap that photo. What I want you to do after you do that is compare it to the photo we took in the beginning. And then I want you to compare with a partner. So I'll give you all several minutes to do that, because I actually want to come around and take a look at the before and after photos. And then we'll talk about that. The only way I came to terms with this was because of the number of people who I had tell me I look mean. I had people say, you look mean, you look angry, you look arrogant, you look like you are better than everybody else, that you are just done with it, over it all. And I did this and I said, wow, they're right. So this goes back to what? Appearance. What things can you do to make yourself more aware of your resting face? Because again, this is the face that you'll be displaying most of the time, not the first one. Let me kind of hear from you all. What do you think you can do to make yourself more aware of your resting face?
Be careful about not zoning out in public.
I think that's important. So she said be careful about not just completely zoning out, especially, and we're putting this in context, think about when you get ready to give a presentation. Sometimes you're already nervous. So you want to think about your appearance and how you look. Anybody else?
Have energy. Make sure it gives you more expression in your face.
Exactly. Try to project energy. Try to use expression. I don't know, sometimes it helps me if I speak to a few people before I start my presentation, then it kind of helps me focus and get into the mode of what I need to be doing. Yes?
Sometimes, like, when you talk to people with that face, they'll probably look back at you like, what? So that look back makes you, like, fix your face.
So again, engaging with other people and viewing their response helps make you aware of what your face may look like. I tell you, like I said, I think that 80% of how effective you are has got to do with your nonverbal. Before you ever open your mouth up, 80% has already been almost decided. Yes?
I just think too, if you like go into it like with a smile on your face, even if you're not necessarily in a good mood or whatever, like eventually you will become in a better mood because you're like faking it. Like, I don't know, faking a good, like, I don't know how to describe that.
I think what you're describing is fake it until you make it.
Yeah.
You might not always be happy, you might not always feel like being in a place, but again, when you're presenting your research, you don't want for people to leave your presentation with a negative view of your research or with a negative view of who you are as a person. And often we're representing the university. When I go somewhere and I say it's my university, so I'm attached to UAB. And so then I go out and I'm not conscious of these things and people say, oh, well, those people from UAB, they're mean, they're arrogant, they're rude, all from that sort of thing. So again, keep all of these things in mind as you are considering presenting your research. Let's talk a bit further about a winning presentation. So we know how to give a good one, but what's going to set you apart from everyone else? One of the main things is finding a mentor. So when I was in the Toastmasters speaking group, I had identified a couple of mentors. These were people who had won competitions and could really help me hone my skills. And they were able to point out weaknesses and then give me feedback. So that's something I suggest you do. A mentor may be a professor. It even could be one of your peers that has more experience than you do with giving presentations. Practicing is huge. Just about all of my presentations I have videotaped. There is nothing more humbling than watching yourself give a presentation and critiquing your own performance. Very humbling. But it's something that can help you improve in ways that you would not even imagine. Coordinate your movements with your presentation. There are people that I call runners, and these are people that walk back and forth, and the movement is not related to the speech. They walk and they walk and they walk and they walk. You want to coordinate your movements with what you're going to say. So if I say, well, now we'll transition into talking about resting face. Resting face is defined as the neutral position that your face is in when you're neither happy nor sad. So I coordinate my movement with a transition. That way I'm not just moving all about and having you follow me back and forth through the room and getting dizzy. So your movement needs to have a purpose. Yes?
You're visually representing the transition.
Yes, I like that. Visually representing the transition with your movement. Okay, so that's really important. And some people naturally do that better than others. That's why it's a good idea to watch yourself and see what your habits are and identify those things you can improve. We talk about resting face, be aware of it. This is the face that probably 99% of the time you'll display. So think about that. And then finally, be yourself, be flexible. One thing that really helps out presentations is humor. But I found over the years, I'm just not a funny person. And things that I think are funny, everybody else does not think are funny. Things I don't think are funny, everybody else just bursts into laughter. So I really have to calculate humor into my presentations. And that can be a very sensitive topic, so you always want to be careful when you incorporate humor. Yes?
Can you give an example of what you find funny?
You know what, William, now you're putting me on the spot. And just because you put me on the spot, I cannot think of one. I'm sure after I get done, I'll be able to think of one. I can't necessarily think of one right now at the moment. I'll try my best to think of something. But it always happens. I think it's funny, nobody else does. So I said, okay, I need to go back. Yes.
Just a quick example. So if you keep saying rest face, but you're familiar with the common term that goes with that, and you accidentally say that while you're giving a professional speech, it may be funny, but it could also totally transform the mood within the room if you say the wrong resting face.
Exactly. Right, so I did, and I see you noticed that.
So everyone knows what I'm talking about. It's
Yes.
pretty much resting bitch face.
Yeah, okay, I didn't expect you to say that.
RBS, right?
I didn't
Or
expect you to
RBS,
say that.
excuse me. Yes.
Right, so I edited that out of this
Yeah.
one, but yes, that's what it's usually referred to as, again, because it's associated with someone being arrogant, being just done, completely over it. So again, keep all of these things at the forefront as you're crafting your presentations. And finally, again, I think what you say is probably 20% in terms of the effectiveness of your presentation. How you say it, I think, will really impact your audience more than what you say. Visual aids, think about them, and I want to say something about PowerPoint. I know a lot of people use PowerPoint. So there is a market analyst by the name of Guy Kawasaki, and so he advocates for this PowerPoint rule. It's a 10-20-30 rule. So it says no more than 10 slides, no more than 20 minutes for the presentation, and then the font should be no smaller than 30-point font. Now, depending on what you're doing, that may change, but there are a lot of different rules of thumb, and I think his reference was to a seminar, not necessarily to maybe a lecture. So there are some differences. In general, the more experience you have, the less amount of slides you need, because you'll just be able to speak from what you know. And then finally, go the extra mile. Seek out a mentor or a friend or a person that you trust to help you and give you feedback. That's all I have for you today. If you have questions, yes,
Do
William.
you plan on doing 10?
Say again?
Do you plan on doing 10?
You know what, I thought about it. It's just that right now I'm in the process of my dissertation and it's a whole lot of work. But that's something I will consider maybe in the future. It just takes a lot of work in preparing for that. It's like another job. Any other questions about any your research. Yes?
Would you say that you use the same skills for like an interview as well, or would this just be kind of more focused towards presentations and
You know what, I do use a lot of these same skills in interviewing, because if you think about it, posture is important. The way you articulate is important, and all these things our employers are looking at to see whether or not you'll be a good fit for that. And most of the time, just about every position you interview for or apply for, you'll have to interact with other people. And people who do that really well are able to set themselves apart in the competition. So yes, interviewing, networking, presentations, even with friends it helps sometimes. But that's a totally different topic or different. Any other questions about any of this? Well, by me being in the group Toastmasters, they had a rule that you would get penalized for every filler word that you used. And literally there was a person to record every time you said or or so. So after you hear the report that you've used a filler word 30 times, it starts to make you more conscious of it. So by me being in that group and practicing that over and over and over again, I was able to work it down to almost no filler words. And again, practicing and rehearsing what you do. That really helps you refine your skill. With pauses, I think it took me a little bit longer, because the natural tendency, especially when you're giving a presentation, is to just talk, talk, talk. I have to get through this material, I have to do this, I have to do that. But when you think about it, when you pause, it gives people the opportunity to think about what you just said. And it's really helpful in lectures. I think professors don't do it enough. After you make a point, it's okay to just pause and let everybody think about it, to let that sink in. And then it just adds even more effect to what you're saying. It's like pulling everybody in through the use of that. And then with the tone of your voice and volume too. Oh, that's huge. So again, by me being in that Toastmasters group, a lot of those skills I was able to practice. And practicing this is like practicing any other skill. The more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it. And think about all these things as you plan for your presentation, and please do plan. So it takes me a lot of time to build a presentation. So I think this one was 21 slides. So it took me several hours to put these together. It may appear, may not appear that way, but when I prepare for a presentation, maybe total I'll spend about 8 hours in it. Writing it, practicing it, editing it, all of those things. So keep those things in mind as well. Any more questions? You all have been an excellent audience. Thank you so much for choosing to come to this, and I hope that you've heard something, at least one thing that you can take and help you when you get ready to do your next presentation. So have a good rest of the afternoon.